forever. I am yours forever. Yours forever. I am yours forever. Yours forever. I am yours forever. Yeah. Yours forever. Yours forever. I am yours forever. Yours forever. I am yours forever. Yours forever. I am yours. That feels good. A little bit louder, we sing.
Good evening, brothers and sisters, and welcome to another Wednesday here at Church on Purpose. We're excited to be back together once again for our time of learning and study, and we're so grateful that you are here to join us this evening. We want you to feel welcome, and so at this time, there ought to be some messages going on there in the chat as you are greeting one another, and we're going to go ahead and get this evening started off with a little bit of praise and worship, and then we'll hit some announcements, and then we will be back to continue our time of learning, study, and growth as we continue our current series describing Church on Purpose. So we're excited that you're here. We're grateful that you're here, and we're looking forward to growing with you this evening. We'll be back in just a few moments to continue with our lesson series.
Thanks. It's thank you, Lord, for all you've done for me. Come on, let's worship him today. Simple song, let's take it back. All right. Tragedies are commonplace. All kinds of diseases. People are slipping away. The economy's down. People can't get enough pay. But as for me, all I can say is thank you, Lord, for all you've done for me. Yeah, yes. Can we be thankful this morning? Amen. Folks without homes are in the streets, and the drug habits, some say they just can't be. Muggers and robbers, no place seems to be safe. But you've been my protection every step of the way. And I want to say thank you, Lord, for all you've done for me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It could have been me. Thank you. Outdoors. Thank you. With no food. Thank you. And no clothes. Thank you. All left alone. Thank you. Without a friend. Thank you. Or just another number. Thank you. With a tragic end. But you that you can give God on. Thanking Him for every good thing, every bad thing, because we've learned from situations. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with me, God. Thank you, Jesus.
Happy New Day, Church on Purpose. Here are your announcements and reminders for the month. We're so happy that each of you chose to worship with us. If this is your first time worshiping with us, text the word WELCOME to 531-233-5190 to receive a special thank you for joining us today. Mark your calendar for these upcoming events. Our theme at Church on Purpose for 2021 is Who Are You? Learning to see ourselves the way He sees us. Make sure you tune in each Sunday at 9:45 a.m. and Wednesday at 6:25 p.m. right here at live.churchonpurpose.org or by mobile device via the Church Center app. Speaking of the Church Center app, there's no better time to get connected. Visit the Apple Store or Google Play Store to download the Church Center app to your mobile device. Search for Church on Purpose and get linked to all of the basics needed to stay engaged. Need assistance? We can help. Email us at office.churchonpurpose.org. Husbands, grab your wives. Wives, grab your husbands. It's time for our first Ministry to Marriages Power Hour. Sunday, March 14th at 2 o'clock p.m., founder of No Love Inc., Eddie Fairley, joins us for a period of exploration, equipping, and strengthening of our marriages. Register today at events.churchonpurpose.org or through the Church Center app. It's spring cleaning time. Join Church on Purpose, Habitat for Humanity, the Hartman Avenue Neighborhood Association, Nona, and partner churches from Village Zone 7 and 8 for the first Village Dumpster Day of 2021. Saturday, March 20th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., bring your items for disposal to the Village Empowerment Center, 5190 Sprague Plaza. No paints, oils, or tires will be accepted. Bins will be available until they are full. It's time to get cleaning. Monday, March 29th through Friday, April 2nd is Holy Week, the time each year leading up to Easter when we remember the final week of Jesus' earthly ministry that led him to the cross. Pastor Jonathan and Pastor Marvin Gilliam Jr. of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia, are back again for 5 nights of Holy Week meditations. Beginning each night at 6:30 Central Time, join us on Facebook or YouTube for an interactive experience you won't forget. Resurrection Sunday is fast approaching, and you're invited to the celebration on Sunday, April 4th, here at live.churchonpurpose.org. Prayer begins at 9:25 a.m. on Zoom with worship to follow at 9:45 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and our church website. Don't miss this moment and don't come alone. Invite someone to join you for virtual Easter Sunday worship and let's celebrate Jesus' victory over the grave together. Here are a few final reminders. Each month at Church on Purpose, we pick one North Omaha nonprofit and one North Omaha business to highlight and support. Here are our selected highlights for this month. Are you 12 years old or younger? Then here's a special invitation for you.
We have some exciting news about Kingdom Kids. Layla, take it over.
Every first and third Sundays, we have something just for kids. K through 8th grade will meet on Zoom at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will do interactive activities that we can use in our everyday life. Join us for Kingdom Kids.
5 and under have their own Zoom class at 12:45 p.m. where they will learn and grow with stories about Jesus. Join us, see you there.
We're so blessed with an amazing church family, we had to take the time to say happy birthday or happy anniversary to the following Church on Purpose family members. Supporting the work of the kingdom through Church on Purpose is easier than ever. Give online at our website, give on the go through our mobile app, use your existing PayPal or Cash App services, or text any dollar amount to 84321. We couldn't do what we do without your consistent support. Have you supported your church this week? Don't forget, at the conclusion to today's lesson, we'll gather in small groups in the room and online for a period of reflection to answer the 2 questions. What stuck out to me the most from the lesson? And what am I going to do differently this week based on what I learned? To participate virtually, click the reflection link in your Church Center app or go to sun.churchonpurpose.org at the conclusion of this message. That's all of your announcements and reminders for this month at Church on Purpose. Be sure to catch us each week at live.churchonpurpose.org and follow us on social media via Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram as you live each day on purpose.
All right. Good evening again, everyone, and thank you so much for just your presence here this evening. Excited, looking forward to another night sharing together, learning and growing together as we continue this overview of our new series, our new teaching series that's going to carry us through much of this year. And possibly potentially into some of next year, titled Describing Church on Purpose. And so this series it's been a great opportunity for us to really dig into the DNA of Church on Purpose. And as we've been kind of beginning to walk through this series and just kind of provide an overview of this series, one of the things that it has allowed us to do is to share different principles with you all that you can utilize when considering aligning yourself or partnering yourself with any organization, not just the church, and also not just organizations, but committing yourself in any relationship. This has given us the opportunity to explore what some of those questions are that we should ask so that we enter into that committed relationship being aware of what we're committing ourselves to, being aware of our expectations in that commitment, and being aware of the expectations of the organization or the other individual that we are committing to, because like we talked about last week, kind of in a little bit more depth, everybody has expectations. And more often than not, things go sour in our relationships when we don't know what those expectations are and those expectations go unmet. And so a big part of this series and a big part of the approach that we are going to be taking here at Church on Purpose moving forward is doing as much as we can early in our relationship with those who choose to partner with Church on Purpose, doing as much as we can to ensure you have a good understanding and a good feel for what the expectations of the church are going to be of you, and that we create the space to be able to have that dialogue about what the that's pretty cool, what what expectations you have of the church, so that we can talk about those things and have space to be able to get that out early in the relationship, so that we can move forward in a fruitful and agreed upon way. So just as a reminder, tonight, and then of course next Wednesday will be our last Wednesday as doing this overview, and then we will move into our Holy Week meditations in partnership with Pastor Marvin Gilliam Jr. of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church there in Richmond, Virginia. And then after Easter, we will come back and we will begin digging in to each of these elements that we are covering in this overview. And that opportunity of learning, of growing, of discussion and development is going to take place in Zoom. And so you'll have the opportunity to register for that, so that you can get access to that information, and so that you can get access to the materials that are going to go along with those lessons. So we're looking forward to that, and grateful for each of you, those of you that have joined us on our church website tonight. Good evening and God bless you. So what up to the Chapmans? They're upstairs. Good evening to Miss Karen, to Deacon Wells and family, to the Rogers family. What up? What up? What up? What up? It's good to see you all. Thank you all for dropping in the chat. I see others of you that are online, but those are just the individuals that have already said something in the chat. So thank you so much for taking time to do that. And for those of you that are joining us on Facebook, good afternoon, good evening to you as well. And those of you joining us on YouTube, we are grateful for everybody for plugging in wherever you are. We're thankful that you wanted to take time this evening to be with us here at Church on Purpose, and prayerfully this evening is a blessing to you, because we got about 45 minutes that we're going to use to walk through this overview information, and then we will release you for the night. So it is again, we are looking at this series titled Describing Church on Purpose. And right now we're kind of doing the overview. And last week we had the opportunity to jump into this 3-part overview by addressing what a committed disciple looks like. And we talked about questions that it would be good to ask an organization before connecting with that organization. And as I thought more about our time last week, I realized that it probably would have been easier to understand the concepts if I had framed that conversation in relation to this conversation like this. The conversation last week and on that discipleship level really gives us the opportunity to begin to ask those questions and engage in that level of thought and consideration when we are committing ourselves to the church. That is the capital C, the universal transcendent church, the church that Jesus built. When we are becoming members, when we're becoming part of that church, that those are a lot of the questions that we went through last Wednesday. So if you call yourself, if you are a part of Christ's body, if you are a member of the church, if you are a believer, if you are a kingdom citizen, then a lot of the stuff that we discussed last week, those are the foundational elements that you want to make sure you are addressing in your faith and in your growth. And you want to be plugged into a place that's going to help you to grow and to be discipled in those areas. That head, the heart, and the both the corporate hands and the individual hands of a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so last week's conversation focused really on that aspect of being connected to the big C church, to the universal church, to the transcendent church. You put your faith in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You become a part of the church before you become a member of a church. And so because we talked about connecting with the church last week, tonight our conversation is really going to be centered around questions that are good to ask when you are when you're looking to connect yourself or looking to commit to a local church, when you're looking to get connected to a church. And this is, of course, not just a church, but any kind of local body, local organization that is going to come along with its own history, its own connections, its own structure, and you really trying to figure out how to navigate that experience and be able to maximize it both for you and for the organization or the entity. And so tonight, as we jump in, we are going to that's what we're going to look at. We're going to talk about in this particular stage, really describing what a mature or a committed member looks like. So our question for tonight is, or our thought for tonight is questions to ask about membership before committing to any organization. And so here is, again, a very familiar question, similar question to what we asked last week. What should I know? Just like when you are committing to the Big C church, to the Church Universal, there are certain things that you need to know. And that is also the case when you are looking to commit to a local assembly, when you're looking to get connected to a church. It is good to consider, as a member of that church, what should you know? Then we also are going to talk about what should I commit to? This is where we're going to get into matters of the heart. And then we're going to dig into what should I expect? Because again, we talked about this last week. Everybody in a relationship has expectations. Now, whether those expectations are clear, that's totally up to us. That is our opportunity to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that that our expectations are clear. Because again, we have expectations, and the organization, the entity, the other party has expectations as well. So what is expected of me? And that's how we'll wrap up our conversation tonight. And so when we look at this particular topic, this subject matter, again, questions to ask about membership before committing to any organization, just like we talked about last week. Before you commit yourself to any entity, any body, any organization, you want to be asking yourself, what is the product? What is the product? What is being produced by this organization? What is people are going in one way. How are they coming out on the other side? How are they changing? How are they growing? How are they developing? How are they evolving? How are they becoming better versions of themselves? What is that organization producing? What is the product? Because that is going to be one of the clearest indicators of what you can expect to change about your life should you become a member of that organization. Which again is why it is so extremely important for those of us that have committed ourselves and aligned ourselves with both the Big C church and the Little C church, that we pay attention to the way that we live our lives in an authentic way, not a phony way to paint some fake picture that's not really attainable, but in authentic ways that allow the love, the spirit, the activity of Christ in our lives to shine through as an example and a model of what people can expect to be manifested in their lives by being connected to the church and a church. Again, part of the problem is that we go into these relationships with organizations and entities and with our own ideas of what product we want produced, but we aren't the ones that produce the product. The organization is what produces the product, because the organization is what provides the pathways and the processes and the structure that ends up producing some kind of outcome. And so regardless of what you desire of a product, the organization is going to produce in you what the organization is seeking to produce. If you are plugged in, if you're engaged, then what is going to manifest in you is what the organization is manifesting. Prime example, if you have an organization with people that engage in a lot of gossip and a lot of talk, and they spend a lot of time talking about other people and what other people got going on. Well, you're only going to be there so long. You're only going to be plugged in there so long before some of that energy starts to flow into you, and before you start to replicate those behaviors. And so, again, it's really important that we take into consideration what is the product, what is being produced by this entity, because you can fully expect what is being produced to be reproduced within you. Now, this is where you have to be really intentional, though, really careful, because on both sides of it. For one, as members of and those representatives of organizations and, of the church universal and the local church, that's why we have to be so intentional about our lives, because we don't want to be that reason. We don't want to be that person. We don't want to be that justification that someone uses for why they either don't want to build a relationship with Jesus Christ or why they don't want to get plugged into the church. Because all it takes is one, to give people a sour taste in their mouth and to give them enough of an excuse to not bother with any of that. And again, we have to remember, especially as the church, that it's not just about getting people in the building, but it's about getting people connected to the body. It's about getting people in Christ. It's about their eternities, not just their immediates. And so the work that we do is very weighty, and we have to embrace that responsibility as ambassadors of Christ, as Paul says in Scripture. We have to embrace that responsibility here in the earth and appreciate that, and make sure that we are living our lives in a way that is reflective of the greatness and the goodness of the God that we serve. But on the other side of that, when we are looking and we're taking into consideration what we are connecting ourselves to and who we want to partner with, you have to work really hard sometimes to not make a decision off of just a single experience or a single individual. It can be really easy. You have a single, one bad experience, and it just gives you a sour taste. You just like, you know what? No, I'm done. Or meet one person and they just funky and you just don't like them and you don't want to be around them. And you just like, nah, if they going to be there, I don't want to be there. Well, sometimes we can do ourselves a disservice, and we can disqualify ourselves from amazing opportunities because when we ran up against our first obstacle, rather than digging through, we ran away. And so I would encourage you, if you are engaged in that process and you're praying right now about where to connect and where to plug in, be intentional about expanding your sample size. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Expand your sample size. Don't rely on just one experience. If you are visiting different churches, don't just visit one time and make a decision based off of that one visit. If you meet one person out of all of the people that's there, if you meet one person that stank, don't don't lump the entire organization into the category with that one person. But get to meet more people, connect with more people to really get an idea of the kind of spirit and the kind of culture that exists in that place, because that'll give you a better idea and a more accurate representation of what that organization, what that church is really like. Because we all know, no matter how great an organization, no matter how great an entity is, no matter how great a church is, there are always going to be people that are connected to it that have a lot of growing to do. And truthfully, I mean, you want that. I mean, you want a place where not just mature people feel comfortable being, but where immature people feel comfortable being as well. But you want to make sure that it's an environment that is challenging those immature people to mature. The Apostle Paul talks about how we gotta grow up, and we gotta, sometimes at some point we gotta get off milk, and we got to start eating the meat of our faith. And we have to mature. We shouldn't be 20 years from now, we shouldn't be at the same stage or same phase of our faith that we are today, but we ought to be in an environment where we're growing. And so when we think about that, realize that there are going to be people of all different levels of spiritual maturity that are going to be lumped into this group called a church. And so expand your sample size. Don't allow one bad experience to give you the determination that everybody that's here is like that. Expand your sample size, meet more people, because again, there are people at all different levels of maturity that are a part of the body. And you just want to make sure, if you're coming into contact with and coming across immature people, that you are in an environment that is challenging those individuals to grow. Is the preaching and the teaching challenging those individuals to grow and to be more like Christ, or is it stroking their ego and allowing them to be comfortable in their immaturity? Because if a place is allowing people to be comfortable in their immaturity and not encouraging and challenging them to grow, you need to do a personal assessment of if that's the kind of place that you want to be. I would hope that you would say no, because I would hope that you would be looking for a place where you can grow. But you have to be intentional about assessing what the product is, looking at what is being produced there, in people's heads, in their hearts, in their corporate hands, and their interactions together, their collaboration, their connectivity, and as well as their individual hands, their individual behaviors. What is being produced is shaped and structured by these 4 areas. And so, similar to last week, we're going to go through these 4 areas and look at how that relates to specifically connecting with a local church. Since last week we talked about connecting with the church. So when we again talk about this whole idea of questions to ask about membership before committing to any organization, again, we start with the head. And with the head, it is, what should I know? What should I know and what should I understand if I am going to be a member of this organization or this church? And again, a lot of this conversation tonight specifically is going to relate to church membership, because we're a church. but again, these principles can be taken and they can be applied to many other contexts, any other context where you are considering connecting yourself with a local group of anybody, a local fraternity or sorority chapter, a local service organization chapter, a local chapter of a social or civil rights organization, entity, whatever. When you're looking at connecting yourself with a local body where you are going to engage in regular and consistent fellowship, where relationships are going to be built and developed, where you are going to have the opportunity to exert your influence and also be influenced, it's good to ask yourself these questions. So the first question: what should I know? What should I know and what should I understand about this particular body? So, again, last week, that was within the context of coming into the kingdom, becoming a part of the church. Tonight, we're talking about becoming a part of a church. And while a lot of the stuff that we talked about last week should really apply to every single, that the information, the answers to those questions should really be super similar from church to church to church, because we're all a part of the kingdom. These answers end up being a little bit more specific to the DNA of the local assembly. And so it's important that you, again, don't make the assumption that every organization and every entity that calls itself a church or a ministry is going to be the same as what you have already experienced or the same as what you're already thinking. But you really have to do your due diligence to understand who they are, because again, who they are is going to determine what they produce. And if you align yourself with them, then that's what's going to be produced in your life. And you need to make sure that you are informed about what people are reproducing in your life, because whatever you produce is what you got to eat. We're farmers. Whatever we grow is what we eat. So you need to make sure that you end up in a place where what you're growing is what you okay eating. What should I know? So at Church on Purpose, this is what it ends up looking like. For people who connect with Church on Purpose, the expectation is that you would know and understand the history and the profile of Church on Purpose. So we go back through how Janae and I ended up here in Omaha, Nebraska. We go through the back, and really we talked about a lot of this at the beginning of the year as we just kind of walk through the call and the vision and the implementation and all of those things from our journey. But you should know the history of the organization or the entity. You should know where it came from and why it is and what it's doing and what it's been doing. And the profile, these include the demographics of the organization. What's the makeup of the organization? Is it, if you're 22 years old, is everybody else in the organization 65 and up? That's important to know ahead of time, because that's going to relate to your interaction and your ability to build and sustain relationships in your stage of life. And so you want to get an idea and an understanding of the profile of the church as well, the demographics and such. And then affiliations and distinctions, because organizations are affiliated with other organizations. And it's important to know who that organization, who that entity is running with, who they're surrounding themselves with, who they're fellowshipping and interacting with. Because again, people say all the time, like, you're the sum of your 5 closest friends. Well, that doesn't just apply to us as individuals, but that also applies to us as organizations, as entities, as churches. Oftentimes we don't appreciate how much the churches that we fellowship with actually influence our approach to ministry. There is some sharing of DNA there, and so you want to know who the organization, who the church is affiliated with, because that will also give you an understanding and an indicator of what is important to that church, as well as distinctions. So, what is it that makes this church unique? What are some things that are, unique, distinct? What are some things that stand out about this particular local assembly? And this is really very important, because when you understand the distinctions, then it gives you some insight into the mindset and the philosophy of the organization, and the leadership in that organization. Because if 98% of the stuff is the same, and then it's this little 2% that's different, if that 2% is like crazy different, then you can rest assured that there might be some other crazy stuff that's going to be going on in the other 98%. And so be clear about understanding the distinctives and what the organization believes is distinct about itself. That'll give you a lot of insight into the thought process and the philosophy of leadership. And then you want to understand the mission and the vision. You want to understand what they're doing and what they see. You want to understand where they're going and how they plan to get there, because that is the roadmap that you're going to be running on. And so you want to make sure that, one, it is a path that you are willing to travel, and that it is taking you to a destination that you ultimately want to arrive at. And so it's important that you take an opportunity to hear those, to understand those, to get clarity if there's any ambiguity or if you have any questions. But be clear about it, because that is what, as a member, that is what you are committing yourself to. You are committing to utilize your energies, your efforts to help advance the mission and the vision of the organization that you are committing yourself to. And then strategic goals. So strategic goals are a little bit different than mission and vision. The vision really talks about the long term goals and the long term objectives, where your strategic goals are more so checkpoints along the way. So we're moving in this direction. This is a checkpoint that we want to get to. And so we have, as an organization, set this as how we're going to get there. And so strategic goals are really important. Of course, organizational structure is extremely important, because that gives you insight into how the organization is going to function, where you're going to be as a part of that, which helps you to understand how to navigate the experience within that. And then, of course, opportunities to serve. The whole point of connecting is not just to reap benefits, but to be a benefit, not just to receive blessings, but to be a blessing. And so you want to know about and be clear about opportunities for you to serve, because what you don't want to happen is get connected to and commit to an organization with the assumption that you're going to have opportunities to serve in the areas that you have a desire to serve, only to find out once you get there that you ain't going to get to do that here. So don't wait, don't drag your feet with understanding that and figuring all of that out. This is these are things that you want to be thinking about, things that you want to be talking about. And of course, here in the coming weeks and months at Church on Purpose, we're going to be walking through each one of these and answering questions about them and dialoguing about them a little bit, so that everybody is clear. So then once we've talked about the head piece, then you want to start working on the heart piece. And so questions to ask about membership before committing to the organization. The heart question is, what should I commit to? What should I commit to? Commitment is a matter of the heart. And when you are considering what you're being asked to commit to, it's extremely important that you're clear about this. Because again, organizations have expectations of who their members are going to be, and of what kind of commitment is going to be demonstrated by their members. And so, that being the case, you want to be really clear about what you should be committing to as a member of that organization or entity. And so for our organization, what we're talking about for our church, the expectation is that members commit to biblical and ecclesiastical authority. The authority for what we do comes from a specific place, and the authority for who leads in that place comes from a specific place. And so as members, we are committing ourselves to following the authority that has been laid out, and to partnering with that authority in order to accomplish the objectives of the organization. And so, that's what it looks, of course, in the church, the Bible is our authority. The Word of God provides the foundation and the structure for what it is that we do. And the Word is very clear that the Lord invests the power, the authority in the local church, within the responsibility of our leaders, the pastors at the church. And so, when we are committing to the organization, we are also committing to the biblical and the ecclesiastical authority that is established there. And so you want to be very clear about that and understand who it is you're going to be following, and not only the authority that they have, but also the accountability that is there. And so then, of course, covenantal relationships, and this speaks to being committed to the commitments, committed to the commitments that we make to one another. As a member of an organization, it's about more than you. That there are other people to take into consideration, and there are others that you are responsible for and accountable to. And so it's important that you understand that, because you are making a commitment. When you're making a commitment to an organization, even though it's under the name, you're making a commitment to the other people that are there. And you want to be very clear about that, because oftentimes it is the commitment to the other people that is more, that requires us to grow more than just commitment to the name of the organization. It is when we are committed in those relationships to the point where we're not going to allow division and discord to sit and to fester. But we're going to be so committed to our covenantal relationships and to walking together with one another that we're going to do what's necessary to have those conversations that help us to move beyond the barriers and the blockades, so that we can keep walking down the road together. And then, of course, church culture. Committing to the culture of the church. Again, we talked about this several weeks ago when we first started this, but every church is made up of people, and any grouping of people is going to be a collection of different personalities and different makeups. And so every church, just like every person has their own DNA, every church has its own DNA. And out of that DNA is going to be produced a specific culture that is unique to the people that make up that church. And so just because you came from a First Baptist church over here and now you move into a First Baptist church over here does not mean that that's going to be the same church culture. Okay. And so you understand that when you commit to being a member of that organization, you are committing to the culture that has been established there. And this is, an opportunity just to pop in and say, like, be really intentional about understanding culture, because as my friend and my brother, Pastor Marvin Gilliam Jr. shared with us at our leadership retreat a couple years ago, John Maxwell says, culture eats vision for lunch. And so, it doesn't matter how great the vision is for and mission and vision is some of the things that you need to know and understand, but it doesn't matter how great the vision is if the culture is trash. And so you need to be really intentional about trying to understand the culture that you are inserting yourself in, and understand that by you becoming a member of that you are committing to propagating, to perpetuating, to promoting. That was a lot of P's. That culture. That you are going to allow that culture to be formed in you, and that you're going to be a part of helping to maintain, sustain, and to grow that culture. So those are the things that you should commit to. That's where we talk about the heart stuff. So now let's talk about the corporate hand stuff. Let's talk about, how we interact with the organization itself. And so when, questions to ask about membership before committing to an organization, you should be asking yourself, what can you expect? What can you expect from the church? Because again, we can't act like people are in these are in any kind of relationship without expectations. If somebody tells you that they don't have expectations, they are lying to your face. In any relationship, in friendships, in love, in hate, people have expectations, and they will interact with you and treat you based upon their expectations. And so it's very clear, if you want the relationship to be fruitful, it's very clear that you learn how to communicate your expectations and also be clear about what is expected of you. And so when we talk about this corporate behavior, there are some things that you ought to be able to expect from the church, the organization that you are becoming a part of. And with our church, the expectation is that you can expect us to honor God in our pursuit of church health. That's an expectation that you can have of the church. The church ought to be working in a way that honors God and is pursuing a healthy environment for those who are a part of the church. A healthy church honors God. And so you need to understand that that is a realistic, authentic, important expectation that you should have of any church that you plan to plug into, or any organization that you're looking to connect with. Ought to have You ought to be able to hold them accountable for creating a healthy environment for its membership. If that is not if that's not a consideration, if that's not a priority, if that's not a thought, then you have to understand that you may be connecting yourself with an organization or an entity that is okay with being dysfunctional. And if they are okay with being dysfunctional, then guess what's going to be produced? Dysfunction. And if dysfunction is being produced in the body and you're a part of the body, guess what's going to be reproduced in you? Dysfunction. So you should feel comfortable with expecting the church to honor God in its pursuit of church health, and to maintain a healthy church environment that encourages, here it is, personal growth and connection. See, you should be able to expect the church to not only maintain the healthy environment, but one that encourages personal growth. Not just an environment where you depend on the pastor for everything, and you can't make a decision in your life without the pastor, and you can't grow in your life without the pastor. And every time you need a word, you got to get it from the pastor. And every time you need prayer, you got to get it from the pastor. That does not encourage personal growth. That encourages parasitic grouping. All that does is acquire for itself more parasites that are feeding off of and not being and not offering the opportunity to do some feeding. But you want to be a part of an environment that encourages personal growth and connection, because again, organizations are made up of many members, and the more connections that you have, the healthier the organization is going to be. A church that fosters opportunities for connection amongst its membership is going to be a church that is healthier, and that is providing more opportunities for growth on that journey. Because when we walk down the road with other people, we are certainly going to be provided with opportunities to grow and to develop. You should expect the church to be good stewards of all its resources, or any organization that you're partnering with. You should expect that entity to be good stewards of all of its resources. If you're investing time in that organization, that church ought to be a good steward of your time. They shouldn't be out here wasting your time. If you're investing your energy into that, it ought to be for fruitful purposes. They ought not be wasting your energy. If you're investing your money into that, then they ought to be managing those resources well. They ought to be good stewards of all of its resources, including its human resources, meaning that, the makeup of the membership, we ought to be creating an environment that enables people to make the contribution that they are most effective and impactful at being able to make. And we'll get into that when we get into our closing, our G how. Well, it's not really a G how tonight, because it's not Jesus's own words, not quotes, but I mean, Jesus is the word. So technically anyway, when we look at our Bible verse tonight, we'll bring that back and make that connection there. And then, of course, last but not least, you should expect the church to treat each member with love, dignity, and respect. And I think this is kind of one of those things that flies under the radar. And so we end up connecting ourselves with organizations, with entities, with other individuals and relationships. We end up committing to these relationships and these partnerships without an understanding that you are expecting to be treated with love, dignity, and respect. That you're not partnering with and supporting this mission and vision and helping to advance this with the expectation that you are going to be disrespected, or that you're not going to be loved, or that you're not going to be looked out for. or that you're going to be treated as less than. No, you have the right to expect the organization to treat you and everybody else that's a member of the organization with love, with dignity, and with respect. So we got about 10 minutes, and this brings us to our last section. So we talked about the head. What should you know? We talked about the heart. What should you commit to? We talked about the corporate interactions. What can you expect of the church? But then we also have to understand that, when we're talking about membership at an organization, you need to understand that expectations flow both ways. So the same way that you can have expectations of the church has expectations of you, and it's important to understand those as well. And so the question here is, what is expected of me? If you're already connected with an organization, with an entity, and if you, excuse me, got some hiccups there. But if you are already connected to an organization, entity, if you are in a relationship and you're reading this question right now and you can't answer it, you either already have some problems or you are well on your way to some problems. Because if you don't understand what's expected of you, then it's going to be very easy for you to fall short of those expectations. And so it's important when you are looking at the kind of organization, the kind of entity, the kind of church that you're looking to connect with, you need to understand what's expected of you. Now, at Church on Purpose, some of the things that we talk about, pretty simple. 3 basics. We expect people that become members of Church on Purpose to pursue their relationship with Christ as their highest priority, to support the mission, vision, strategic plans of the church with their time, their talent, their treasure, and their testimony, and to treat one another with love, respect, and embrace. And that's regardless of any differences that we may have, or disagreements that we may come up against. And again, when we get into our deeper dive sessions, when we're digging into this in our Zoom group together, then we'll elaborate on these more. We'll dig into them a little bit more. We'll flesh them out a little bit more and try to, identify some examples and some models, so that this really comes to life in our hearts. But the organization has expectations of you. And when you are considering becoming a member of anything, any society, any affiliation, any organization, that organization has expectations of you. And you will make your time far more fruitful when you go into that, or very early on in your connection with that, you get very clear about what's expected of you. Okay. So those are some questions to ask in relation to church membership. And here's what that means for us together. In Romans chapter 12, verses 4 through, we highlight very often at Church on Purpose verses 4 through 6, but we're going to look at verses 4 through 8 from the Message Bible as we close up tonight. Because Eugene Peterson just does such a phenomenal job with really painting a very clear picture of the opportunity to be a member in the body of Christ and a member of a local assembly and how that works together. So in verse 4, he says, in this way, we are like the various parts of a human body. Each part gets its meaning from the body as a whole, not the other way around. The body we're talking about is Christ's body of chosen people. Each of us finds our meaning and function as a part of his body. But as a chopped off finger or a cut off toe, we wouldn't amount to much, would we? So since we find ourselves fashioned into all these excellently formed and marvelously functioning parts in Christ's body, let's just go ahead and be what we were made to be without enviously or pridefully comparing ourselves to each other or trying to be something we aren't. If you preach, Just preach God's message, nothing else. If you help, just help. Don't take over. If you teach, stick to your teaching. If you give encouraging guidance, be careful that you don't get bossy. If you're put in charge, don't manipulate. If you're called to give aid to people in distress, keep your eyes open and be quick to respond. If you work with the disadvantaged, don't let yourself get irritated with them or depressed by them. Keep a smile on your face. I think that's such a beautiful example of just how we can work together as a part of the body, and really embracing this imagery of a body and understanding that we all bring unique contributions to the work that we do. And that's important and valuable for us because it elevates the value for us being a part of the body. See, there are a lot of people that claim to know Jesus, but refuse to go to church. And it is so contradictory to what Jesus preached and how the kingdom operates, because we can't do anything on our own. But we are able to experience the fullness of who we are when we are in community. And there are certain things that God just will not do in your life while you are cut off and isolated, that he would and could do if you are a part of a healthy body. And that's the key, y'all, is healthy bodies. We got to stop being okay with and accepting and making excuses for unhealthy bodies. We got to stop supporting unhealthy bodies, because if we keep feeding them, they're going to continue to perpetuate and spread the sickness. And so we have to elevate our standards and expectations of the kind of churches, the kind of organizations that we are a part of, that we're affiliated with, and that we are willing to invest our resources, our time, our talent, our treasure, our testimony in, because where we are willing to invest is what we are promoting. And we want to make sure that our investment is being invested in a great place that is going to produce return, that is going to produce growth, that is going to produce impact in our community, not just a place because it's a place. You know, we have to be intelligent about what we're committing ourselves to and where we're aligning ourselves. And we got to break these habits of connection for the sake of connection, because that ain't where it's at. That's not what it's about. It's not about just being connected to a body. It's about being connected to a healthy body, and being a healthy member of that healthy body, so that the collective, the group, the corporate together can engage in the activity that is ultimately going to lead to transformation. So that is the conversation about membership. And if you are considering membership at Church on Purpose, any other church, or just membership in an organization, then I hope that some of the questions that we asked tonight and some of the things that we talked about tonight will help you in your evaluation process, in your courtship, because you're preparing for a committed relationship. And so you ought to be learning through that process as they are learning you, as you're preparing to make that commitment, so that when you make a commitment, you can be truly committed and you can feel good about the commitment that you made, and not enter into that with regret. So that concludes, our time tonight and what we have to share from that piece. Again, next week, we're going to wrap up this overview piece. And then the week after that, we'll be back for our Holy Week meditations, which will be Monday through Friday, each night at 6:30 p.m. I think it's 6:30 our time. Yeah, 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 Eastern time. Yeah, I think. Hold on, let me pull this graphic up right now, because I might be saying the wrong thing. I might be giving y'all the wrong times. Where is There it is. Yes, 6:30 Central. So 6:30 Central, Holy Week, the week leading up to Resurrection. And we'll be getting together. We'll be talking through some profiles of different characters from the Holy Week narrative. And so it'll be an interesting look at a couple of familiar players. And so looking forward to you all being a part of the conversation there in the chat. And just like last year, Pastor Marvin and I will be inviting other pastor and minister friends to be a part of that conversation that week, that dialogue, so that we can have a great time chopping it up as we share there. And so then after that, then we'll come back and we'll start digging into each of these segments in a much more deeper, much more intentional way to make sure that we understand the concepts. And that's going to specifically relate to being connected at Church on Purpose. So last week we talked about just kind of connecting with the church. Tonight we talked about connecting with a church. And next week we're going to talk about leading in the church. We're going to talk about what mature leadership in the church looks like. And this is going to give you not only some things to aspire to, but also a rubric and a tool to evaluate and assess the existing leadership in an organization, so that you can make sure that it is a place that's going to be fruitful for you, allowing you to grow and to mature and to maximize your potential in the world. We appreciate you for joining us. You're invited to join us in our Zoom for a period of virtual reflection, where you can visit sun.churchonpurpose.org. And we're going to take just a couple of minutes to answer the two questions you see on your screen. What stuck out to me the most from the lesson, and what am I going to do differently this week based on what I heard? You don't have to turn your camera on. We just want to reflect with you. We want to find out what stuck out to you from this lesson tonight, and how it's going to impact you as you continue to move forward, because we're all about growing together here at Church on Purpose. We're grateful that you joined us tonight. We appreciate you being here. We look forward to seeing you back here on Sunday at 9:45 a.m. Countdown begins at 9:40 and worship kicks off at 9:45 a.m. We look forward to seeing you there. We love you. God bless you. Live each day on purpose.